St. Ives is a brand that everyone knows, one that everyone has tried at some point. In a way, we all have a relationship with the brand because of our unique and yet shared experience. But few truly know where the brand came from, how they grew to be so ubiquitous, and why their fall from popularity was so undeserved. Many today believe St. Ives began in 1955. This is not true. St. Ives was actually founded by Gary H. Worth and his business partner Robert Van Dyne in 1980 from scratch and was made to produce personal care goods, namely shampoo, conditioner, and hand soap, for the mass market. The brand, which was based in Chatsworth, Los Angeles, used the imagery of the Swiss Alps to tout what they called a Swiss formula and credits their formula being based on the Swiss practice of blending natural products with scientific advances to enhance the effectiveness of products, much in the same way that other companies use herbs or aloe vera in their marketing to differentiate their product, even going as far as to import herbs, extracts, and plant proteins from Switzerland. This whole concept for the brand was likely conceived because of Worth's knowledge of the industry, having been in the game since 1971 when he purchased a fragrance development company that he cleverly named Fragrance Development, later changing it to Cosmetic Laboratories. Though these were two very separate businesses, they still grew alongside each other, and by 1982 had both seen steady growth, with Cosmetic Laboratories even having a space in Morocco. But yet, while both had steady growth, neither had steady profits, lagging far behind the industry average still by the beginning of 1986. However, in this time, they had devised a plan. Knowing they couldn't compete on advertising, which by this point across the toiletries and cosmetics industry had ballooned to $2 billion, they instead changed their packaging to be very eye-catching in the hopes of competing at the point of sale, banking only on the impulse purchases of customers. And their refocus proved to be right. It was quantified later that 66% of buyers decided on a particular brand after they entered the store, for which St. Ives' bright packaging and competitively low price made the brand stand out amongst the crowd, bringing sales to $78 million in 1986 and supporting a staff of 400. Needless to say, bright packaging and low cost became their company strategy from this point onwards. However, they did once deviate from this, and it almost cost them the company. In 1985, they produced a luxury shampoo named Pure, which was again only actually differentiated in packaging, not in product. However, for promotion, instead of their usual low-price, bright packaging, instead followed the competitor formula of using advertising to increase the value of the product through demand, which they hoped would put it into the luxury category. This did not work, and instead ran the company up $3 million in losses. It seems as if this was the catalyst for St. Ives and Cosmetic Laboratories to merge in June 1987 in anticipation for the company going public on April 22, 1987. Namely, it seems that this was done in the hopes of drumming up new finances after Gary H. Worth, then the St. Ives chairman, chief executive, and biggest stockholder, sold 28% of the company's stock for $12 million and put the company in the public space in order to expand their manufacturing facilities to explore new products. They experimented for quite some time and were actually doing well for a spell. Between 1987 and 1989, their stock price climbed by almost $5. However, again, just one bad move caused that to plummet all the way back to $6.38 per share, half of the original listing price. But this time, it was an even tinier change. You see, this duo I showed you earlier of the earliest St. Ives product that I could find was of a shampoo and conditioner duo in 1985 that was sold shrink-wrapped to one another and was their best-selling product, so much so that the brand was reliant on its consistent sales. However, after changing the packaging to an opaque shrink wrap, made the product look smaller, less value for money, and so directly affected sales, causing their stock to bomb. Their earnings dropped 16% to $3.8 million, and their net income was down 48%, though that was also affected by a lawsuit of $1.43 million over distribution rights in the UK. This does seem like a lot of damage for a small packaging change, but When reminded that they had no formula differentiator and had literally only seen success due to their packaging and low price benefiting off of impulse purchasing, it becomes clear as to why the effects were so negative. Luckily for them though, the cosmetics industry has a great markup and a great spend. So despite St. Ives still not really being a brand with a public perception, it wasn't really a thought of brand in that way, it was just the brand that you impulse purchased because it was cheap only, they were still relatively healthy without long-term debt after they reverted to the previous packaging again. Because of this, the company was able to grow quietly in the background to regain their previous valuation, clawing back to sales of $175.6 million by 1994, half of which came from skincare. However, even as successful as they were, they knew that without brand perception, they were likely to fail in the long run. Almost everything consumable by this point in the 90s had become dependent on branding, and the brand itself was what provided the most added value, with personal care being no different. You see, in the 80s to mid-90s, many companies like Unilever, Colgate, Procter & Gamble, Palmolive, Johnson & Johnson, many more, aggressively expanded product lines and cut prices to form these mega brands that we know today, to which St. Ives knew they could not compete, at least not alone. Soon after, they settled on an if you can't beat them, join them attitude with a merger with a company called Alberto Culver, which purchased St. Ives for $15 per share, totaling $120 million in 1995, completing in 1996. This would change everything for St. Ives, who, you'll remember so far, has never had enough money to invest in advertising for it to be worthwhile, and the one time they did, it flopped. However, under Alberto Culver, they would immediately see a large year-one marketing investment of between $50 and $100 million. But because they were actually aiming for lower sales than before at $150 million, we can assume that this budget was likely meant as an effort to clean up brand perception to aid them in the long term rather than to boost immediate sales. This they would pretty soon see benefits from, however, as around the same time as the founder Robert Van Dyne, now known as Rick Big, had left the company, they released their first real cash cow product, the St. Ives Body Lotion. It was a hypoallergenic and non-comedogenic, which means it was light, wouldn't block the pores, moisturizer for sensitive skin, and as a result became widely popular for its formula. To emulate this, their then mildly popular apricot scrub received an ultra-gentle version soon after in 2000, boosting its popularity more than they could have expected. I know in hindsight that many different brand histories say that the bad reviews for St. Ives came at this point. And though that is true, it's actually in a sea of incredibly positive customer ratings. Frankly, anything with the following that this product was growing to have was bound to have negative reviews amongst the crowd. And so, at least in my opinion, the positive reviews outweigh the negative, at least at this stage in 2001. For reference, all of these reviews on the screen are from makeupalley.com, which have kept all their reviews from this time, and so nearly every source that talks about the brand picks their reviews from here. However, as you can see from this graph, and of course you're more than welcome to pause to read, it seems as if for the most part, everyone is happy with the scrub. Either it works for them or they use it as a body scrub. Though I think Hiram sums up the user experience with the brand the best when he explains that because it's a rough exfoliant that doesn't break down with water, it gives the appearance that it's working really well because it gives an instantaneous perceived improvement in skin smoothness. This inadvertently resulted in many people, even like myself, believing this product worked phenomenally well, and as a result, it became the go-to for swathes of people at this time. By 2003, it had grown such a cult following that it received a dedicated TV advertising campaign in this 2003 ad series, and ads would run consistently over the years for the apricot scrub, turning it into their most defining product, overtaking all of their previous cash cows. By 2009, Alberto Culver, the company St. Ives had merged with, now had annual sales of $1.6 billion US, operated in 9 countries, had 2,700 employees, and were looking for buyers when Unilever agreed to buy Alberto Culver for $3.7 billion at $37.50 per share. Now under the Unilever umbrella, they almost immediately made the Alberto Culver name defunct and took their brands for parts, meaning St. Ives was now standing alone in the seas of Unilever personal care brands. But they certainly held market share. They had a product that worked, was cheap, and the brand had become well known enough to influence the popularity of other products like this lotion, much in the same way they had hoped to do when they merged with Alberto Culver. St. Ives, as a brand, was now doing very well. However, around the time of 2015, there began to be a discourse over whether scrubs, not necessarily the St. Ives scrub, but any scrub, was harmful to your skin. And of course, with the St. Ives Apricot Scrub being the market leader and a product that everyone knew and had mostly used, the St. Ives brand got the brunt of this anecdotal discussion. This all eventually came to a head in 2016 when Kaylee Browning and Sarah Basil filed a lawsuit against Unilever and St. Ives, claiming that the walnut shell powder used in the formula caused what they called micro tears and therefore was in some way either misleading or falsely advertised to the consumer. Now this is a whole rabbit hole in itself, but one that James Welsh has made a video on explaining in the past, which I do highly recommend. But in a walnut shell, the plaintiffs claimed that the scrub, because of the walnut shell ingredient, would cause micro tears. However, it seems that the term micro tears is misleading in itself, as in no way could the plaintiffs prove that they could cause more damage than like products. They could prove that because of the less smooth surface of the walnut shell particles that it was a strong scrub, but it literally says on the packaging that this is a strong scrub, so isn't actually misleading in any way, nor does it cause more damage to one's skin than any other deep scrub with jagged pieces. The plaintiffs had asked for $5 million. However, after a long, almost 3-year battle, their claim was eventually thrown out because there was no hard evidence to support the plaintiffs' claims. But regardless of the fact that these were unfounded claims, the damage to the brand had been done. Over the course of the lawsuit, news articles and reviews had gone into overdrive to decry the benefits of the scrub in a way that still today affects brand perception. Even after the lawsuit was thrown out in December 2018 and articles like this one from Glamour came up to explain why the lawsuit was unfair on their reputation, the prevailing opinion of the brand is that it is one to avoid. And in general, most still believe that a walnut scrub is too damaging for all skin. For example, Kylie's Skin saw a large amount of backlash for including walnut shell in their 2020 scrub launch. And yet, despite all of this brand damage, as far as I could tell, St. Ives and Unilever have never actually made a statement regarding the lawsuit whatsoever. They haven't countersued or even claimed defamation. But they did, back in 2017, begin to repackage. Starting with this lotion in November 2017, which would have looked like this before, they began to revert back to their old marketing philosophy, competing once more on the point of sale with brightly colored packaging and a consistently low price. This was around a year before the lawsuit came to an end, and by the time it was clear that they'd won the court case, they'd even returned to filming advertising, using this new brightly colored packaging to inform a new spirited kind of advert that directly targets millennials and Gen Z. And though I don't necessarily think they're doing either a good or a bad job with traditional media, they certainly are missing a decent social media strategy to really target this audience in a way that doesn't feel so corporate. The best thing I can say about it is that at least their Instagram is consistent and will at least help them wait until the perception of the brand has changed enough to make a comeback. I would imagine we're not too far away from this now, especially after awareness for the misinformation has increased and sales still appear to be okay for the brand. I do, however, foresee them dropping the Swiss positioning because despite owning a small laboratory in Sion, Switzerland, which I believe opened in 1980, there is very little connection, and they don't want to seem like they're misleading, even for something as nominal as that, after that kind of very public lawsuit and distrust in the brand. They will want to seem like the most honest and reliable company on the market, so moving the focus onto their natural ingredients is just a smarter marketing move. Ultimately, St. Ives, the company, was for a long time not about having the most authentic branding, the best formula, or even trying to be a desirable product. They were a bog-standard, cheap, personal care brand that just happened to have a product that felt like it worked for a lot of customers. If they can revert to that positioning now and become the superdrug of natural personal care products, then that's a positioning they know they have the history and the brand name to flourish in. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one, and for videos like this but about fashion brands, do check out my fashion channel, and thank you doubly to my patrons whose names are on the screen now for supporting the channel. If you too would like your name here and early access to new videos, the Patreon link is down below.